She left her husband for a wealthier man, claiming it was for their future. But the truth behind her decision changed everything. Marcus had never imagined that stability could be the very thing that unraveled his marriage. Yet that was exactly what happened when his wife, Leila, began speaking more frequently about goals, ambitions, and futures that sounded less like shared dreams and more like escape routes. For years, they had lived a modest life built on responsible choices and realistic expectations, the kind of life that grew slowly and quietly, but lacked the sharp edges of excitement Leila increasingly craved. She insisted it was temporary, that she simply wanted more for both of them. But the tone in her voice gradually shifted from hopeful to restless, and the restlessness eventually took shape in the form of a man named Adrian. Adrian appeared first as a casual name in her stories, a wealthy acquaintance she claimed to have met through a work event, someone who seemed to thrive effortlessly in ways she admired. Over time, his presence in her conversations grew, always framed as inspiration, as if describing him could motivate Marcus to push harder, earn more, become someone she believed he could be if only he tried. Yet beneath her encouragement lingered a quiet disappointment, a sense that Marcus was falling short of potential she projected onto him without asking whether he shared her vision. The day she told him Adrian had offered opportunities felt strange to Marcus, not because of the offer itself, but because of the glow in her expression when she described it. She said Adrian had connections, ideas, ways to reshape lives with a single decision. She said he believed she deserved more, that they both did, that their future could accelerate if they aligned with someone who possessed the resources they lacked. Something in her tone revealed that she had already accepted the idea long before sharing it. When she finally announced she was leaving, she framed it as an act of love, a sacrifice rather than abandonment. She insisted she was doing it for them, not for herself, that Adrian's wealth could give them the life they had always imagined but could never afford. She spoke as if stepping into another man's world would somehow benefit Marcus as well, promising that once she secured financial backing, she would help him too. The words struck him as surreal, not because of the betrayal, but because she genuinely believed her decision carried logic rather than selfishness. She packed her things methodically, each movement strangely calm, as though she had rehearsed the moment until it felt rational. Marcus watched without raising his voice, absorbing the reality that the woman he trusted had convinced herself her departure was noble. She left with a confident stride, claiming that one day he would understand, that he would thank her when their lives improved. Yet, as the door closed behind her, Marcus realized something she had overlooked. She believed Adrian's wealth would elevate her, protect her, empower her, but she never considered that Adrian's interest might not extend beyond the thrill of acquiring someone eager to be transformed. In her pursuit of a better future, she had not questioned whether Adrian viewed her as a partner or a prize. Marcus remained in the quiet house, feeling the absence settle into the space she once filled. He did not blame himself, nor did he chase explanations. Instead, he began piecing together the truth forming beneath her promises. Leila was not leaving for a shared future. She was leaving for a fantasy she hoped someone else would finance. And fantasies, he suspected, rarely survived real life. Marcus spent the first days after Leila's departure in a strange state of clarity, the kind that emerges when something has broken so cleanly that the mind no longer wastes effort searching for cracks. He moved through the house with quiet intention, noticing how quickly the space adjusted to her absence. Her decorative touches felt hollow now, remnants of a life she no longer valued. There was no dramatic collapse, no frantic confusion. Instead, a calm acceptance settled in, allowing him to see everything with sharper edges. He realized how long Leila had been drifting away, how many subtle choices she had made before gathering the courage to step into another man's world. It was not sudden. It was a slow tilt toward temptation dressed as opportunity. Meanwhile, Adrian's influence unfolded exactly as Leila had described it, at least on the surface. She posted curated glimpses of her new life online, lavish dinners, polished settings, glimpses of luxury she had once claimed she would share with Marcus someday. Her caption spoke of ambition, growth, transformation, as if wealth alone had already reshaped her into the person she believed she was meant to become. To outsiders, the upgrade seemed undeniable, but Marcus understood something those polished images did not convey. Leila had begun tailoring herself to Adrian's expectations, smoothing away parts of her personality that once made her complicated, authentic, unpredictable in ways that wealth could not simplify. She was learning to fit inside a world built by someone else, a world where admiration was earned not through sincerity, but through compliance. As Marcus observed her new lifestyle from a distance, he noticed a subtle pattern. Everything she shared revolved around Adrian's possessions, Adrian's connections, Adrian's status. Nothing revolved around her own identity. The woman who claimed she left to build a brighter future now appeared as an accessory in someone else's narrative. Marcus continued working, maintaining steady routines that anchored him through the transition. He found himself growing more focused, less burdened by the pressure she once placed on him. Without her constant comparisons to wealthier men, he finally felt free to evaluate his life without judgment. Unexpectedly, he began to notice improvements. His productivity increased. His mental clarity sharpened. Friends who once kept their distance reached out, offering support not out of pity, but respect for how calmly he handled the upheaval. Meanwhile, Leila's world began to show tiny fractures. Her online posts grew less frequent. The spark in her expressions dimmed, replaced by a cautious stiffness suggesting that wealth came with rules she had not anticipated. Adrian's presence in her photos shifted too. At first he appeared by her side, then gradually at a distance, until eventually he disappeared from her updates altogether. Marcus didn't need confirmation to understand what was happening. Leila had left believing wealth would guarantee security, but she had miscalculated the cost of entering someone else's orbit. Adrian was a man accustomed to novelty, and novelty had a short lifespan in his world. Leila's attempts to secure a future through him likely felt different once she realized she was not the exception she imagined herself to be. Still, Marcus felt no satisfaction in the unraveling. He simply watched it unfold with the same quiet understanding that guided him through her departure. He knew she had left chasing a fantasy she believed would elevate them both, but fantasies rarely considered consequences. And now, for the first time since she walked out, Marcus sensed that Leila was beginning to understand the truth. Behind the promises she once repeated with such confidence, Leila's descent from curated luxury into muted uncertainty unfolded not through dramatic confessions, but through small, telling shifts that Marcus noticed even from afar. Her once vibrant posts showcasing fine restaurants and expensive views now carried a subdued tone, the kind that revealed more in what was omitted than in what was shared. The glamorous wardrobe Adrian had introduced her to seemed less prominent. The confident expressions she had worn with pride slowly faded into guarded half-smiles, as if the weight of maintaining the illusion had begun to strain her. Marcus observed these changes without attachment, aware that he was witnessing the unraveling of a choice she had believed was noble. She had convinced herself that leaving him for a wealthier man would elevate both of their lives, yet now she seemed like someone wandering through a world that welcomed her only conditionally. Meanwhile, Marcus focused on rebuilding his own life with steady determination. He understood that dwelling on her decisions would do nothing to restore what had already dissolved. Instead, he used his newfound clarity to strengthen the areas of his life that had long suffered under Leila's quiet dissatisfaction. He improved his finances, reconnected with family, and allowed himself to rediscover interests he had set aside in the name of maintaining harmony. The simplicity of daily life felt refreshing after years of trying to measure up to standards Leila had absorbed from people like Adrian. As months passed, the contrast between their lives became increasingly clear. Marcus's progress, though modest, was steady and grounded. Leila's path, once gilded with promises, had become unpredictable. The final confirmation of her reality arrived in an unexpected message. She reached out late one evening, her words carefully composed yet carrying an undercurrent of desperation. She asked how Marcus was doing, phrased in a casual tone, but revealing more than she intended. Marcus sensed that her contact was not motivated by nostalgia but by unease. Something in her new life had shifted, and she was testing whether the bridge she burned still had pieces left to salvage. He responded politely, but distantly, aware that any warmth could reignite expectations he no longer carried. Leela replied with a hesitant admission wrapped in vague language. She mentioned that things with Adrian had become complicated, a word heavy with implications yet deliberately nonspecific. From her phrasing, Marcus understood that the financial security she had chased was proving less reliable than she imagined. Adrian's generosity came with conditions she had not anticipated, and his interest in her had diminished once the novelty wore off. She hinted that the lifestyle was not what she expected, that promises made in confidence had unraveled into uncomfortable truths. Marcus read her messages with quiet understanding. There was no bitterness, no desire to remind her of the pain she caused. Instead, he recognized her struggle as the inevitable result of choices made for the wrong reasons. In her pursuit of wealth, she had overlooked the consequences of tying her future to someone whose affection was transactional. As her messages grew more reflective, it became clear that she was seeking reassurance, perhaps even hoping for a path back into Marcus's life. She expressed regret without explicitly stating it, describing moments where she felt lost, undervalued, or overshadowed. She framed her mistakes in careful terms, trying to soften the weight of her decisions. Marcus responded with kindness but maintained boundaries. He knew that reconnecting would only pull him into the remnants of a life he had already outgrown. Her words revealed a truth she had not yet admitted out loud. She left thinking she would lift them both, but instead she had lost herself in the pursuit of a future defined by someone else's wealth. Marcus understood now that her departure had not been an act of love or sacrifice. It had been an escape fueled by promises that were never meant to last. And in the quiet distance between their messages, he sensed that Leela was beginning to realize it. In the weeks that followed, Leela's messages became more frequent, each one revealing another thin layer of a life that was unraveling faster than she could contain. She never admitted outright that Adrian had grown distant, but her descriptions made it clear enough. She spoke of canceled plans, of long stretches without communication, of elegant gatherings where she felt more like decoration than a partner. The woman who once believed wealth would secure their future now struggled to keep her footing in an environment where attention shifted according to novelty, beauty, and convenience. Marcus observed all of this without inserting himself into her emotional spiral. He had reached a point where her choices belonged to her alone, and though he recognized the pain she was navigating, he no longer felt responsible for guiding or softening her path. He had begun to rebuild what she once dismissed as too ordinary, creating a stable life grounded not in aspiration, but in realistic goals. He found satisfaction in steady routines, improved finances, and small victories that required no validation from anyone else. His world, once overshadowed by her ambitions, felt open and spacious again. Meanwhile, Leela's attempts to reconnect grew more hesitant, as if she sensed the distance Marcus maintained was not temporary. She offered small updates about her situation, each more revealing than the last. Adrian had become increasingly unavailable, spending less time with her and more with people who matched the lifestyle he curated. She hinted that he no longer spoke of long-term plans, that his once generous promises had dried into vague reassurances. She described feeling invisible in the very world she had believed would elevate her. One evening, she finally admitted that she had moved out of Adrian's home. She didn't explain where she went next, but the tone of her message carried a resignation she could no longer mask. The illusion of financial salvation had collapsed, leaving her with neither the security she chased nor the relationship she abandoned. Marcus read her words with a quiet, measured calm. He felt no joy in her misfortune, no vindication in her downfall. He simply saw a woman confronting the consequences of a choice made for all the wrong reasons. What surprised him most was how little anger remained inside him. The months of reflection had drained the resentment, leaving behind a grounded acceptance. The past no longer held him the way it held her. Leela's next message differed from the others. It was longer, slower, touched with vulnerability rather than pretense. She confessed that she missed the stability they once had, even if she had taken it for granted. She implied that she might want to talk in person someday, not in hopes of restoring what they lost, but simply to apologize properly. For the first time, she spoke without referencing money, opportunity, or ambition. This version of her sounded like the woman Marcus once knew before she convinced herself that wealth would solve every insecurity she carried. But Marcus had already stepped into a new stage of his life. The clarity he gained during her absence had exposed how strained their relationship had been long before she left. Her fixation on wealth had created a gulf between them that no apology could bridge. He responded gently, telling her he hoped she found what she needed, but he did not encourage further connection. He kept the message respectful but firm, making it clear that his path no longer aligned with hers. Leela's reply came hours later, filled with quiet acceptance rather than resistance. She thanked him for his kindness and did not write again. And in that silence, Marcus sensed the true conclusion of their story, not explosive, not dramatic, simply a fading thread between two people who had chased different definitions of a better life. As days passed without further messages, Marcus felt a sense of closure settle naturally. The home that once echoed with doubts now carried a steady calm. The life Leela abandoned had become the life Marcus was finally ready to embrace for himself. And somewhere beyond his world, Leela was learning a truth she had spent too long ignoring. Chasing someone else's fortune could never replace the value of a life built with integrity. Leela's absence gradually shifted from an open wound into a quiet chapter. Marcus no longer felt compelled to revisit. As the months moved forward, he built a life defined not by comparison or scarcity, but by deliberate choices that reflected who he truly was. He refined his work situation, strengthened his savings, reconnected with people he had unintentionally drifted from, and found new routines that gave him steadiness rather than pressure. Nothing about his progress was fueled by revenge or the desire to prove himself to someone who had left. Instead, it came from recognizing that peace often grows in the spaces left behind when chaos removes itself. Occasionally, he wondered how Leela was rebuilding her life, but the curiosity was detached, free of lingering attachment. He knew she carried lessons he could not teach her, shaped by circumstances she had created herself. The last remnants of their connection surfaced when a mutual acquaintance mentioned seeing her working a regular job in a quiet part of town, far removed from the polished lifestyle she once chased. There was no mockery in the observation, only a sense of neutrality. It seemed she had stepped out of Adrian's world completely, abandoning the glittering illusion she once equated with salvation. Marcus felt no triumph in the news, only a recognition that she had finally returned to a reality governed by effort rather than promises. Weeks later, Leela reached out one final time, though her message held none of the tentative hope she once displayed. Instead, it read like a farewell to a version of herself she no longer wished to carry. She thanked Marcus for how he handled everything, acknowledged her mistakes clearly, and admitted she had allowed insecurity and ambition to cloud her judgment. She said she understood now that chasing wealth had not been about providing for their future, it had been about validating parts of her identity she had refused to confront. She didn't ask for reconciliation or friendship. She didn't hint at regret in the form of longing. Instead, she spoke with a calm acceptance that suggested she finally saw the truth Marcus had quietly recognized long ago. Leaving had not liberated her. It had exposed her. Marcus responded kindly, wishing her well without reopening any doors. When the conversation ended, he felt the distinct sense that a chapter had fully closed not through anger, but through clarity. With Leela's final message fading into memory, Marcus focused entirely on his own future. He redesigned his home to reflect his evolving life, removing decor she once insisted upon and replacing it with pieces chosen for their meaning rather than their appearance. He shifted his routines, explored new opportunities, and gradually found himself surrounded by people who valued authenticity over presentation. Each morning felt lighter than the last, not because his circumstances had transformed dramatically, but because he no longer lived under the weight of someone else's expectations. Meanwhile, Leela faded from his daily thoughts, not erased, but placed gently into the archive of lessons that shape quiet wisdom. He realized that her departure, painful as it had been, had forced him into a level of self-understanding he might never have reached otherwise. Her search for wealth had revealed the instability of foundations built on expectation rather than mutual commitment. In contrast, Marcus discovered that simplicity, steadiness, and genuine connection were worth more than any promise of luxury. By the time a full year had passed, Marcus could walk through his home without remembering the echo of her ambitions. His world felt grounded, purposeful, entirely his own. And somewhere else, Leela walked through a life shaped by choices she once believed were noble, now understanding that her path had diverged from his long before she ever packed her bags. Marcus didn't need to see her transformation to appreciate his own. He knew that both of them had arrived at the truth in their own time. Wealth built on someone else's foundation could never create security, but a life built honestly, even slowly, could create something far stronger. And with that realization, Marcus stepped forward into a future no longer overshadowed by what might have been, but illuminated by what he could now build on his own.